Hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webcast. My name is Andrew Barber, and I will be acting as the moderator for today's presentation, which is sponsored by JAMF Software. It's titled Casper Focus, Helping Teachers Manage iPads in the Digital Classroom. Before I introduce our speaker, Dave Saltmarsh, I want to take a few moments to highlight a couple of items. First, today's event will be recorded. In a couple of days, you'll receive an email from us containing a link to the recorded event, and you'll also be able to download a PDF of the presentation. And second, please ask questions. And you don't have to feel as if you have to wait until the end. We're going to gather up the questions, and I hope to have 10 or 15, maybe even 20 minutes at the end when Dave can answer your question. If you do have a question, just type it into the Q&A box on your console and hit the Submit button. We also have a chat function which you can launch. If you can see the brown group chat icon at the bottom of your screen, just click on that. And you can use chat to talk among yourselves or to contact me or the eSchool News team with any technical issues or other concerns. But please don't use the chat function to ask Dave questions. He's not going to have time to monitor the chat. If you want to ask Dave a question, use the Q&A panel instead. With that out of the way, let me introduce our speaker. Dave Saltmarsh is Educational Evangelist at JAMF Software. And prior to joining the company, he was a classroom teacher turned IT and library director at schools in both Arizona and Maine. In addition to managing all facets of information technology, he's led implementations of one-to-one computers for students, as well as iPad and iPod touch programs, and has focused on personalized learning. Over the last 4 years, he has traveled globally and gained a worldwide perspective on the use of technology in schools and business. Dave has a master's degree in instructional technology and has earned COSM's Certified Educational Technology Leader distinction. Welcome, Dave. It's an honor to have you here today.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction, Andrew, and thank you very much for everyone joining in today to watch this webinar. I greatly appreciate it. And as Andrew mentioned, for the last 4 years since leaving my last school department, I've had a great opportunity to travel around and visit institutions using not just iPads, but utilizing one-to-one technology, and primarily on the Mac side. What I want to share with you before I get into specifics on Casper Focus is the changes that I've seen come about over my 20-ish years in educational technology, and then what I've seen happen most recently over the last few years. I'm going to admit right off the bat there will be a few things with my slides as we go into this system that you'll want to take back, and I've got one little thing here, and I'm going to bring that up again later to explain how some people are ready to just jump in and try using new technology, and at other times it can really be something that nerves out other people and makes them reconsider what they're doing. What I wanted to start talking about was this new opportunity for a balance to bring about the change from a very system IT-focused influence in the technology we use in our schools to a more balanced instructional side. And we've seen that shift and change, but we have an opportunity today to really bring those together. So in one case, making sure we still provide institution security, and at the same time are really concerned about user privacy, whether it's students or staff members. Wanting to be able to implement technology on a very large scale, and at the same time bring opportunities for differentiating users' needs. The ability now that we have today for mass customization of technology means we can really get to the personalized learning situations that we've been striving for in technology for years. We also have the potential to see productivity be a focus, but yet also provide users with empowerment to do what they need to do when they need to do it and at their own pace. not just making sure they have just the tools that somebody thinks they need, but possibly letting them go out on a limb and try new things. And with the new abilities we have with IT, we can help accomplish that. And the other significant piece is that we can get away from the old monolithic concept of having to decide in the spring and early summer what computers or devices we're going to have on them and collect them and then redistribute them only to find out somebody needed something special for a class, or a special needs student came in and needed a new piece of software or an update, but yet having to wait till a break in the school year so IT could regather those devices and prepare that. Today, and JAMF particularly, provides technology to allow us to transition to this blended model where instructional needs really are driving what IT can and can't do. And so what I'd like to do now is get into a specific aspect of that. And when we're looking at transitioning some of the IT tasks that have had to been handed off to IT because, well, they were complicated. But previously, they were maybe something handed by a classroom teacher or an instructional coach, but because it became technical, they drifted off. And in some cases, we got stuck with a single point of knowledge to be able to do something. What we're hoping is that we can facilitate this shared knowledge and shared responsibility with what can be done as far as technology to improve student learning and to create that personalized environment. And a big piece of that is returning some of the tasks that were previously managed by teachers, as I mentioned, and get them back into their hands. And that's really going to allow us to scale for the future if we want to expand the use of technology beyond what somebody started out as a pilot. Because for the last 20-plus years, I've seen a lot of initiatives come and go that had a lot of potential but stagnated once they got out the door because they weren't able to scale out to the larger population amongst the teaching staff. And so this is where we start looking into where are we today. And I am going to be talking primarily along the abilities within the Apple ecosystem. That's what JAMF supports specifically today on the iPad or iOS or iPod Touch side. We certainly could spend an hour talking about what we do on the Mac side, but specifically I want to look at the potential ability that we can help when it comes to the Apple ecosystem with all the amazing apps, content that's available out there for people utilizing. You hear the pause in my voice. I'm watching for the animations to create before I get too far ahead of myself. And so let me catch up to my slides here. You know, being able to harness the full potential of the Apple ecosystem in the classroom is something we're trying to help bring an and to. And that and can help you, especially when you start thinking about the Apple ecosystem as a mechanism to provide the 4 C's. You know, we hear a lot about other systems being able to provide collaboration and communication. But the real learning starts to happen when you transfer to the ability for creativity to foster and to really thrive in environments that bring out critical thinking. And on our side of it, we feel that the Apple platform has that great potential. And we're seeing that being embraced wholeheartedly by the teachers that have first tried iPads in their classrooms. What we've also seen is not just these pioneering teachers and those that are ready to take a big risk perhaps and be on that leading edge, but we're also seeing teachers that previously were possibly hesitant to utilizing technology, that weren't necessarily the early adopters, but they've embraced the potential that iPads have. And you're seeing them use iPads, you know, from cradle to grave, teachers that are in kindergarten, teaching kindergarten, or through high school. You're seeing teachers of all ages and teachers of all experience levels utilizing these tools on their own. And we have the potential to harness and do something different than we've done before. And what we've done before is, and I'm bringing up another model of evaluating technology besides the 4 C's, and that's SAMR. And I'm not going to get too far out on it or go too much in a tangent, but we have seen a lot of use at the substitution level when it's come to technology over the last 20, 25 years. And some teachers are able to then go beyond that and augment the activities they were doing, go from basic word processing and research to doing multimedia-based activities with students and research outside of their walls. But real learning takes changing our teaching practice and moving well beyond that, utilizing the technology to modify what was being done in the classroom. Do new and exciting things that engage students, and ultimately use the technology to transform the learning environment and be able to do activities that redefine to the extent that you're doing something in a classroom with a simulation where you're exploring gravity and perhaps friction and on motion, and a student's able to, on the fly, switch something to see what the effects would be if you changed gravity to being from the Earth to the Moon. And, we could never do that before. Well, the Apple affordances allow us to do that. They give us enhanced abilities. They enhance activities, and they let us change our teaching. However, we also have to create the condition for success that allows the teachers to feel comfortable to do this. It's not as easy as just saying, let's change your teaching style and start to implore more redefinition in the classroom. And getting teachers to move from being at the front of the room, that master of knowledge that's shared, and classrooms where everybody's in a row and they're all on the same page. We're providing technology that could change this, but we also have to provide an ability for teachers to feel comfortable to do this, and wanting them to move into a environment where students are able to work with different groups that are perhaps at their pace, while students at another corner of the room or on a completely different activity perhaps, rather than everybody being following that leader at the front of the room and moving to that student-centered. So to create this condition for success and to free up that teacher so that she or he feels comfortable at moving about the room and not being tethered. Being able to go sit with a group of students while they still feel, another students are being productive. At the same time, being able to address the class for a moment of checking for understanding and not having necessarily to go to the front of the room, but be anywhere in that room. Providing the teacher the tools to be able to feel comfortable doing that will get us to move beyond those early adopters. So this is the kind of premise. This is the premise for providing some management tools to a teacher. And this just didn't come about as an aha in Wisconsin. This came about from talking to teachers all over the world and using lessons learned. Lessons learned from implementing other technologies that stagnated, that 3 years later, electronic whiteboards became expensive whiteboards. Clicker technology that never really got fully adopted to take advantage of students' understanding at the moment as you're going on in the classroom to adjust teaching. These had great potential, but we didn't see them really take off. So when listening to teachers, sometimes you get somebody tells you what the solution is rather than the problem. And we certainly heard some people saying, they thought the answer was, well, it sure would be great if we could lock students or switch students to a single app or website, whether it's one student or the whole class or a group. Now, on the surface, as an instructional technology focused person, I'm not really all excited about that. It's like, well, why do you want to do that? And so much really should go back to why do you want to do something? And what we heard from teachers when you dug a little deeper was, you know what? I start out my class every day, and the first 5 minutes of that transition can be, a little chaotic. And as good classroom management skills, I want to kind of give more consistency to that first 5 minutes. Well, having my class come in, and, I used to write my math questions based off last night's homework on the chalkboard or then the whiteboard. Now, I'm going to post that in Edmodo. Well, if I can have that automatically come up on the students' iPads as they're coming into class, and then gather that electronically rather than just show of hands or turning in paper, I just streamlined that whole process and saved valuable instructional time. If in the middle of class while I'm over working with a group of students, I happen to recognize that they don't get something and maybe I didn't explain it very well, and I want to stop the entire class and get their attention. Well, we heard from teachers that when kids are really engaged and they're working collaboratively and really working, intensely, getting them to stop what they're doing actually can be more difficult when you're using technology. So can we help that? They also, I like to use the name Jimmy quite a bit, but, with 33 students that I used to have, there was always at least one student, for whatever reason that given day, it could have been what he had for breakfast or didn't have. It could be that it was right after he came off of the recess or just something going on that he needed a little help focusing. And for him to be successful and then for me to be successful to help other kids, once in a while, and sometimes that ability to keep a particular student on a task or a few students is very valuable to the overall success of the classroom. And I mentioned I was a former math teacher. I've spoken to math teachers, and they've had some of them have had iPads in their schools for 2 years. And I ask, well, how well are you using the iPads? And they'll be like, well, it's not really, doesn't really meet the needs I have. And digging deeper, you find out, well, they want to give a math quiz. And even though there's math applications that can give them the ability to give a quiz that has, traditional multiple guess, multiple choice questions, but also, higher order thinking and enhanced question types, and the possibility of some automatic grading, which could not only save them time, but really and potentially give the students a whole other way to be assessed. However, because the student can go on the internet, because the student could chat a friend or take a screenshot and share their quiz, these teachers aren't doing it. So they've asked for that secure environment. And secure environment also comes into play if you want to talk about high-stakes exams. Whether you want to give a district-wide reading exam or you're part of the Common Core State Standard program where you're going to be doing those exams. People have invested in the iPad environment, and they've done so for reasons, related to what I've mentioned about affordances, to letting kids really go off the charts when it comes to creativity and critical thinking. And those affordances are great for enhanced question types. Well, wouldn't it be a shame if at the end of the year you took the kids into a computer lab and you had them take this exam on a completely different kind of technology, or you chose a different technology simply to conduct the exams? But if you could conduct the exams on the iPads very easily, yes, you need a keyboard, but if you can actually facilitate the exams, think about the potential power for the students and their ultimate success. There's a few other things we've heard from teachers that led to what we accomplished here. And one is, it takes me back to my very first few days using technology in my classroom. I remember in the 90s, my students were doing electronic portfolios, making web pages. I was the one that had the flat panel projector display. My students were doing presentations, and I saw the power that it changed how kids felt about getting up and presenting. Those kids that would be absent and just fearful actually embraced presenting. Now, at the same time, it was an event. It was, okay, next Tuesday I will have the projector and you will come up and bring me your flash drive and we'll bring up your presentation. You're going to stand in front of the room. And the presenting helped deflect kids' attention and they felt better, but it was still this event. If we can make spontaneous capturing that moment of a student learning something and demonstrating that learning on the fly. Quite frankly, if I'm a reluctant user of technology and you say, okay, you need to have your computer up and running, it needs to be hooked up to a projector, you have to have this software running, you've got to get the student's attention, they have to initiate it. If I can streamline that and simplify it, I will see more teachers embracing the spontaneous students sharing their work from anywhere in the classroom. So for me, this was a big piece. Maybe that came out in my tone. You'll also hear about the document round trip, especially content distribution. There's so many great mechanisms out there now. We just want to be a facilitator to the end of which service, which mechanism you want to use. We can also help in distributing content. Certainly, that's what our bread and butter is, getting apps and ebooks and PDFs out to the students and people that need it in a pretty much a moment's notice. The other piece that's really significant for me is this reducing the reliance on IT. And it's not, I was in charge of a technology department, and, my guys and ladies that were working, some had specific tasks, but spent a lot of time on little things. Well, think about the classroom teacher. If there's anything that goes wrong with the technology that they don't have to be a rocket science to fix, but also don't have to wait however long it takes to put in a work order and get that answer, if there's a couple things that we can remove from them, we've just made a win-win for both sides. We've made a win-win for the IT because of less trouble tickets, and for that teacher because they've gotten past a hurdle that could have been a waste of instructional time and a delay and even a student becoming a disruption because they didn't have anything to do. So we've heard these things. Now, not wanting to get into giving teachers this giant console, we wanted to come up with something that was simplified and not too complex. So how can you accomplish the basic ability, which is to switch and transition a student or an iPad into an app and even a website? Now, Apple has been making great advances, and I've been working in schools with Apple products since 2000, and I've seen the growth and the abilities that they've given schools. And yes, when the iPads came out, when I was doing iPod Touch implementation back before the iPad, there were things I wished I could do, and gradually they've come about. One of them is guided access. Guided access came out with iOS 6, and it gave us that ability, it gave me the ability to hand my iPhone to my 2-year-old niece, get it into an app, tap it, lock it to that app, so she wouldn't get into my email or she wouldn't go out on the internet, and I could feel comfortable with that. It was also really focused at special needs students, so that if you had a student with limited mobility, you could, as a teacher, put them in an app and lock it to that, so that the student didn't accidentally wander out, and then if the teacher was off helping someone else, they'd have to stop and keep helping the student. Well, so many times, and having had a history of working with the technology for special needs students, we take these things and then we go, wow, this would be great for all students. So you can use the original method, and this slide, I apologize, there are a couple bills that came up early, but in just you'll get the idea. A teacher could certainly go around the room to all of the iPads and physically touch them and lock them to an app. However, that's not practical. Even in a special ed class, if you've got 2 or 3 students, it's not really that practical to keep moving around because, in a normal class, students move between apps. The testing environment, that would be reasonable, except who's going to do that and how often are they going to do that? So you could use Apple Configurator, and previously people would be connecting that with cables, and again, that works reasonably well for the one-off opportunities, but it certainly didn't lead itself to spontaneous wanting to pause my class for a check for understanding, the spontaneous putting kids into a quick response app to gauge their understanding. So then the ability came out to do this using a mobile device management system. Now, I should have paused. I'll pause later to mention that's what the Casper suite has in it. JAMF makes device management for Apple products. The Casper suite is a mobile device management system. So an IT person could, from a console, basically, wirelessly, send some commands to switch and lock iPads into apps for guided access. Now, the thing is, having someone in another room is not really that practical. Having somebody, and so pretty much any mobile device management system will let you do that, but I remember doing testing across a district with 10 schools simultaneously in every classroom, hundreds of classrooms wanting to do it. IT couldn't take care of the one-off student needing to leave. They certainly couldn't facilitate the makeup tests. So if we could put that potential right in the hands of a teacher, in the middle, anywhere in the room with their students, with their iPads, and go ahead and let that teacher from their own console do that same activity. And the slides are going a little slower with the animation than I think you would see it in practice, but having all students in a couple seconds switch over to that app for testing on the fly, whether it's a math quiz on Tuesday or it's the district-wide reading test, or I'm just trying to get the kids' attention, and I'm going to show an app with you that just for pausing the kids so that I could do a check for understanding on the fly from my teacher, from the hands of the teacher's own iPad. And the last little bit, I talk a lot about trying to untether teachers. It's really been my goal. A teacher from across the classroom wants a student in a particular app. That ability to be helping somebody and have it happen, without the physical going over to the student is just as important when you want to get a student to present. You see a student doing something, you get their attention. Even if you're using Apple TV, which I encourage, you still have to go out and get the student's attention, ask them to scroll and find the correct Apple TV. And I've been in a school with 200 and something Apple TVs. And asking a kindergartner or second grader to search through and find Mr. Saltmarsh's Apple TV, a little bit of asking a bit from them, not to mention having to put the passcode in. However, if the student just simply gets a prompt from me and they just have to tap a yes, basically, and they're presenting, I've just streamlined this process that hopefully you can imagine the teacher who isn't okay with things not going perfectly is more willing to go ahead, and in my mind, it's going to lead to greater adoption. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get into showing a bit of a demo of the Casper product, Casper Focus product, because I get often asked, in fact, I got asked earlier today, what's it take for a teacher to understand and learn Casper Focus? We know professional development is such a rarity and already challenged to try to fit in with a bunch of other things. Well, in my mind, you can probably show the Casper Focus app to a teacher, and in a matter of minutes, I, of course, can spend more time getting into the why we do it, but the actual how and what to do is pretty straightforward. You do need to be a customer that owns the Casper suite. That's that icon on the left-hand side. The Casper suite is our device management suite that typically is purchased by IT so they can provide this mass customization, getting apps out to students on a moment's notice, setting up restrictions to the individual student, or I should say access or restrictions, individualizing that ability across a district of thousands, tens of thousands of students and devices. Now, in addition, Apple's involved in this. And it used to be you use Apple Configurator, and in the middle, that's an icon for Apple Configurator. Today, the Apple in the middle for most people is the DEP program. device enrollment program. And thankfully, now you combine the Casper Suite and the device enrollment program, setting up the classes and getting the iPads that the kids use assigned to a teacher's account can be done very straightforwardly, combining those. And there isn't, and the key piece that I know I'll get asked at the end, so I'll slow down a little. Casper Focus is a value-added piece of the Casper Suite. It is not an additional cost. So I love talking to customers because they already own us. I was at a school department a couple of weeks ago, and I'm talking to their principals, and at first they thought I was selling them something, and I'm just telling them this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, actually, you already own the Casper Suite. I just want you to get it in use by your teachers. So anyways, if you own a mobile device management system, if you own ours, you can use the Casper Focus. Unfortunately, you can't have a different mobile device management system and use Casper Focus. It does work in conjunction with, but it is not an extra cost. So let me show you. I'm looking at my time here. I'm feeling pretty good. We're going to give you the ability to smooth transitions. That's the primary use for Casper Focus. Yes, I can lock a student to a website, but quite frankly, that was to smooth the transition to get them to that website. We talked about some other things, and clearing passcodes, quite frankly, is something that teachers can do and then not have to call IT when a student locks themselves out. And that's one of those ways of trying to reduce their reliance. I've already talked about the exams and quizzes, so I'll just get into showing it to you. But if you can imagine the on-the-fly potential of a teacher locking a student to an exam, but imagine if a student in that class of 30 had to get up and leave in the middle of the exam. What would you do if it was tied to an MDM and someone in another building had to unlock it? Now the teacher can say, okay, Susie, you're freed up, you can leave. Then when Susie comes in the next day, they can say, okay, you need to go over and sit in the corner and finish the exam, and the teacher can reinitiate the exam. That's what we used to do. And in my mind, we're trying to transition things back. We've taken the processes and put them back into the hands of the teacher. So I'll show some videos here. The Casper Focus overview, rather than showing you the feature pieces, I want you to see that the actual interface just doesn't take a lot for teachers to dive into. On the left, you have the teacher's device, and you can go ahead and open up the app. The teacher will log in probably with an account that is already one they already use in the school district. Now, there's not a lot here to look at. Typically, the teachers have to go up to the menu, and they have to select a class or a group of iPads. Just like you would if you were in a gradebook program. You have to go in and say, okay, I'm working with this group of students. Now, this can be set up. Typically, it's set up by the system IT in the background, and the teacher doesn't have to do anything but choose the group. This could be a cart of iPads, or you could be in a one-to-one situation. So in this particular case, the teacher chooses a group of students they want to work with. Now, I'm watching my time just for a second here, make sure that I'm moving along pretty smoothly here. The teacher selects, and I'm going to select, in this case, and it is a video, select a smaller group of students. Really, once they've done that, there's a couple choices, one that they'll probably make once in a great while. You could choose to see the iPads in a list. I guess if you had 50 of them, that would make sense. But I typically like to see them in icon view. And I can manipulate and move them around if I want. The other option that, again, they're probably going to choose just once is, do you want to see the iPads with a device name, which works if you're using a cart-based model, or would you like to see the iPads with a student name, which makes much more sense? The other couple features, the only other two buttons are the ones they're going to primarily use are focusing a device and clearing a passcode. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of that, but really they're going to utilize those aspects. And what I want to say is I'm rushing a little bit here. We do have on our JAMF website, I put these 8 little videos with annotation and narration so that you could go back and watch these again. In fact, let's see, because of the time, I'm going to look at I have an ability to jump a little bit, and I suppose I do want to show you this one, and it is the fact that some people will ask this question. Casper Focus with groups. You can choose to take an action, and those actions I'll specify in a moment, to an individual student's iPad, the entire class of iPads, or you could pick out like 3 students, 3 iPads. And so this teacher is going to go in and pick groups and going to choose like 3 iPads by tapping on them that they want to switch to a particular app. Let's say I'm in a kindergarten class and I want 4 kids on a reading app. I could then clear that, pick another 4 kids, and switch them to a particular website. So that's what I mean when we get into the concept of being able to choose either one student, a group of students, and multiple groups, or the whole class. And when I show you the next couple of things, I'm only going to pick one student, but please realize I could be doing this with a lot of students. So the primary concept here is being able to switch students to apps. And I mentioned the scenarios. This scenario that I'm going to show you is me wanting to stop every kid in the class from what they're doing because I want to get their attention. Maybe it's just to remind them that there's only 10 minutes left in the class period. But I don't want to wait 3 minutes. So I'm picking the student. I click on Focus Apps, and you can either scroll and find the app you want, or you can search. So I found an app. I've clicked on, I searched in that case, and I click on Done. What you're going to see in a couple seconds, on my iPad, I see the students in an app. On the student's iPad, they have switched to this app. We made it, we share it with you. Keep calm and look up. They stop what they're doing. And when I'm done talking, I go back and I simply remove focus. And I know that kind of went quickly, and I can't go back and rewind this video for you. But the concept was I remove focus by selecting Done. And in a few seconds, the student's device is now freed up. When they were locked, interesting, I'm seeing it move on my screen and not seeing it move on yours, so a little delay here. So the student can't press the home button. They can't turn off the iPad and get out. In this case, I switched the student to Edmodo, and I recognize that video kind of, jumped ahead of me a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to another one to show you the concept of focusing on a website. And it's really the same idea. The teacher wants to focus students on a website. And I'll pause for a second here. How long would it take if you had just come out of the teacher's lounge, if you're a teacher, somebody just gave you a great new web resource directly related to what you were teaching in class, and you go into your class of 3rd graders or 7th graders, and you want to get them on this website because, you know, it's really has some great information. You write it on the whiteboard. And if I said, okay, hit a stopwatch, from that moment, how long would it take for you to get your students' attention and get them all to go into Safari and enter that website and get on that website? Now, in most cases, I wait 5 or 7 seconds for the audience to start shaking their head. And somebody usually says, forget it. I'm going to have to walk around and help some students. Now, imagine being me, the student, who's dyslexic, that I'm always going to type the URL wrong, so I'm always going to be the last student. Sometimes the class will have moved on before I finish it. I'm always embarrassed because the teacher has to come help me. If I could avoid that by instead the teacher going ahead, and hopefully this video will launch for you, the teacher picking, going in and choosing websites instead of apps, the teacher has pre-entered these websites. They can do it very quickly on the fly. They pick the website, and with a matter of a couple seconds, all their students in their class, or one or several, whichever they chose, are switched to Safari. They're technically locked in Safari. They can't get out, and they can only go to that website. So for me, I'm going to ask my students to go ahead and bookmark this site, and then more than likely I'm going to free them up so that they can, they just get to that website. But another scenario might have been I want them to work on a quiz in the VLE or the Learning Management System or Edmodo, for instance, and I could actually get them to that website and keep them there if I wanted to for a period of time. So I think that's the big potential that teachers can see that will save them time. I am going to jump a couple of our videos. As I mentioned, we do have them on our website. But for the matter of time, I want to show you the Apple TV integration. In this particular video, imagine that concept of seeing a student across the room, and without even saying a word to them, you've prompted them to present. They hit OK, and it automatically knows to go to your Apple TV, and it automatically knows the particular passcode without the student ever having to know it. So the teacher picks the student, goes up in a corner, selects the Apple TV, and in seconds the student gets a response, a message, would you like to display? Now, I can't force the kid to present, and in my mind that's a good thing. I can't spy on them. I can't do that. This doesn't facilitate teachers sitting at their desk watching what kids are doing. This facilitates untethered teaching, teaching from your feet, not from your seat. Being able to harness the great potential of the iPads and at the same time streamline some simple processes. So I know those were kind of quick with some of the demo. I hope you got the concepts more in the initial talk. If you want to see it more live, we can set something up, and I certainly, like I said, I have the videos. But what we're trying to accomplish here is improve teacher acceptance. In life, it's food, shelter, sense of security. In a classroom, it's giving the teacher some ability to feel good about having kids move about the room and be in a different environment, but at the same time, meet those security concerns when they want to have a secure quiz, when they want to get all the kids' attention without waiting 2 or 3 minutes or having to implement some other method. I mean, this is really an and to a lot of methods. It's not the replacement, but in many cases it can reduce that. And it does promote effective teaching practices. This idea of making a teacher feel comfortable to let students work at their own pace, but yet pull them in, direct their attention when needed. And it creates that condition for success, which, my goal is mass customization, personalized ability for students learning. Getting teachers comfortable to do that means we have to give them tools beyond what is acceptable to the early adopter. It's not going to teach for them, but hopefully it gives them that feeling, that piece that gets them to be more comfortable. So I moved on pretty quick through this. I'm not going to get into the whole management that we do. We do manage the whole entire Apple ecosystem. Our strive is to listen to what groups of people want to do. When you get a collaborative group of multi-stakeholders together, you hear the whys of what they want to accomplish, the ideas and the whys. And because of those whys, you've chosen the Apple platform or you're thinking about choosing it. We feel that we can really help you along that journey. Wherever you are in your journey, we have the ability to get you started or have you scale to thousands and scale beyond your early adopters. So I'm right at where I was wanting to stop. Hopefully Anthony will great, Dave, it didn't keep going past. We're ready to take some questions and answers. Thank you for hanging on during that quick pace that I probably set. So, Andrew, back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dave. That was terrific, and thank you for sharing your insights on using Casper Focus as part of the larger Casper suite in education. We still have about 15 minutes left, which is a good thing since there are a lot of questions for you, Dave, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Before we start with the questions, I'd just like to remind everyone to please take a couple of seconds to fill out the survey questions on the console that you see in front of you. That would be very helpful. And without further ado, let's head back to the questions, see how many we can take care of. Dave, I think I've seen a couple of questions about using Casper Focus where they're in a situation where they have multiple classrooms and a single cart. Can you just talk through how that works and how Focus would handle that?
Sure. And honestly, that's probably the simplest form for rolling out the Casper Focus. The traditional method, and a lot of us grew our programs, I certainly did, from having cows or carts with the devices. So what we end up doing is we simply create instead of a class of algebra period 3, we create a roster of cart 3, and we add those devices to that cart, and then we create usernames. Now, a teacher could have their own username, and we assign them to have access to that cart, or in some places they just create a generic teacher account, and anyone who uses that teacher account has access to that cart. But I, as a teacher, would log in, they'd give me a username, and let's say there's 3 carts that I have to choose from. Inside the Casper Suite system, somebody simply assigns me access to those 3 carts. And libraries sometimes mix and match, so they can change that out on the fly. If they get a new iPad, it's very straightforward to add, adding one in. Actually, I think in some videos I get into showing how they do that. That's the point I was making about shadow IT. These are the kind of things that our system lets an instructional technology person do or a librarian do that might have been managed by a high-level technician in the past. Switching iPads from one cart to the next, adding a teacher's account, and then assigning a teacher to that to have access. Really straightforward. Not in Casper Focus, but it's done inside the Casper Suite console.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you. You did spend some time on showing us the UI involved in Focus and trying to make it possible for teachers to do things without having IT support. Can you just talk a little bit about the learning curve for teachers as they start to use this and how long it takes them to get up to speed?
Sure, and I kind of mentioned that to begin with. It's a question that I get. What would it take? That's why I showed the interface. Honestly, I love doing this, actually. Go into a school, current customer, I walk in, I say, give me 25, 30 kids, and then I hand the iPad to a teacher. And they look at me like, no. And the teacher is doing things before I can say, oh, distribute an ebook. She's like, oh, I've already done that. The interface is pretty straightforward. Once a teacher is logged in, there's only a couple places for them to go. So honestly, it's a few minutes of here's what you can do. I made those 8 videos of the specific things that are like 2 minutes long. I suggest to schools to have teachers watch my recorded webinar, which is basically what we just did, as a flipped classroom, and then look at those 8 2-minute videos, and really they're on their way. It's as long as the stuff is set up on the back end. That takes a little bit more effort, but the actual teacher piece, you're talking, and certainly within an hour's professional development, but I may take 2 because I like to have teachers play with it when I'm with them. But I do believe it's a very quick learning curve, Simply put, there's not a lot of places to go off on a tangent and get lost.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering that. Let's switch from getting teachers ready to the other side of it, which is administering exams within the classroom. How does Casper Focus work with exams and how they're administered in class?
Great. Well, most of the high-stakes exams, certainly the 2 that are used in the Common Core state standard testing, I also know of a school district that's using a reading exam. These exams require to be able to even be launched and then accessed by a student, they require guided access on an iPad. And so that is a need if you're going to use these particular. So since Casper Focus is guided access, the whole point is that, I've always, and I'll say this, for 15 plus years, I've tried to take things that previous to digital and say, who used to do this? And what was the process? Let's get it back to that. And so a classroom teacher, this is exactly, it's as simple as you have your whole class, you pick the Common Core Smarter Balanced exam, you hit focus, and every single student switches over in a matter of a couple seconds, and now they're able to proceed. And the great thing is, if you're in your class, the kids weren't ready to start for a couple minutes, you as a teacher have the ability to start them a couple minutes later. Whereas if somebody was doing this with a device management system, they're pushing that from a back end. I also mentioned makeups. My goodness, trying to schedule and plan makeups. Well, if you can just send a group of 5 kids to the library, and the librarian on the fly can go ahead and do that without having to have IT involved, that's the natural way we've always done exams. So for me, it puts it back into those teachers, and the technology is just there. For me, it's one of the primary uses for Casper Focus other than smoothing transitions in a classroom.
Okay. All right. Another question that an attendee has asked is talks about students moving from classroom to classroom. Can students shift from classroom to classroom and have this follow them, so to speak?
Yeah, the way it's designed is exactly like a student information system with your class setups. You're in my class for Algebra 1, and so when I open up my grade book, there you are. Well, when I open up Casper Focus and I put Mr. Saltmarsh Algebra 1, Period 2, I get you. When you move to Mr. Smith's science class, Mr. Smith is going to have the roster with a different group of students, and you may now be in that group. So the whole thing is it matches up with your grading, your class roster files. Now, the scenario you don't see is a student that wasn't in my class today that joins. The way we solve that is if kids actually, let's say you're in period 1 algebra, but for scheduling you have to switch to period 5 algebra. That's a synchronized ability with the student information system in most cases that overnight that'll be updated. So primarily it's like a student is going to be in 6 classes over the course of the day if you're 1-to-1, and he's going to have 6 different teachers, and he will appear, she will appear in their class set of iPads depending on which ones they pick. Hopefully that makes sense, but it's pretty much just like you would do for your classes for attendance.
Sure. No, thank you very much. I think that explains it beautifully. I have another question here, and it contains an acronym that I personally am not familiar with, and maybe I hope you are. So I'm going to ask it, and if not, we'll move on. But one of the attendees said, we don't have any management at all. How hard would it be to get everything managed with Casper and DEP?
Great. So DEP, Device Enrollment Program, is the new Apple concept. They came out originally, you got your iPads, and the dilemma that you had is to get them supervised. One of the key aspects to this whole piece is the devices have to be supervised. Basically, it's made an agreement, technical agreement, to allow someone to manage it. You used to have to do that physically and now when you purchase devices from Apple, there's an enrollment program, and you simply let them know the information related to your mobile device management system, and then that's all connected. So in theory, it's just a collaboration with sharing that information that you have the Casper Suite, for instance, and you have some specific code for that ties it all together. Getting up and running, really, there's, with anything, I ask 20 questions. How many, are you a 1-to-1 environment or carts? How big, are you talking 800 and we have 25,000 students at a 1-to-1 somewhere? So complexity of getting up and running varies. It's a straightforward. However, the device enrollment program is a very streamlined process, and that was the main thing they asked. You just have to create an account through with Apple. You can also backdate if you bought devices all the way back, I think, to 2011. You can still go back and get those enrolled into the device enrollment program to retroactively bring them into and the beautiful part about the DEP is those fiascos with kids being able to reset the devices and get out of any restrictions that may have been placed. Now when a device is rebooted, basically, or reset, it comes right back to the management state. And so those are the real benefits if you didn't know about the device enrollment program. One, we can get you supervising the devices without any hands-on, and we can keep the profiles, that we call them, that we put on iPads to give privileges or restrictions, and we can make it so that they're not able to get around those so simply. But as far as getting up and running, and maybe I went around a little bit, it is a conversation. It really taught me how many devices you're having. And however, what we're seeing is with iPads, less technical ability, and the shadow IT is who's running the show. I am not a technical person. I manage technical people, and I have an understanding, but I get iPads up and running. Schools are having librarians, instructional technology people do this type of stuff. So I think it's well within the realm of anybody's possibility.
Okay. I have one other question from someone who seems to need some help, quite frankly. The question is as follows. We use Configurator and the cost, and we looked into MDM, but it was beyond our technical abilities. Our technology is all PC. Our early childhood programs moved to iPad Lab, but we want more control, and then it's just a plaintive call for help.
Sure. Now, here's the thing. JAMF is there, and I mentioned this, and we pride ourselves. We've been doing this for a dozen-plus years in the Apple platform. We meet people where they are in their journey. I do believe that we provide a lot of content and information to get somebody up and running, but we also provide the boots on the ground. And when somebody takes on the Casper suite, and this is a good, bad thing, and as an IT administrator who, again, that single point of knowledge bothers me. When you get started with JAMF, you go through a jump start. So you either can have, and on the iPad side, and I'm not going to get into sales stuff, but you can have a remote session for it's like $750 that jump starts a remote. For a few $1,000s, you can have a person physically come on site. Beyond that, usually large-scale employments bring our pro services teams in and try to help. Quite frankly, I'd like to know that I can do that if I need it. So there is the potential, and I would suggest that you have an offline conversation. There is no technical or even skill reason why you can't get going. And the initial jump start may simply be enough for you, whereas maybe an extra professional services engagement to get you going past that setup. But JAMF services and support is probably our differentiator. I always say other than Casper Focus, because while we provide MDM, we give this classroom piece. I think if you go out and ask people, you're going to find out that our professional services and our support are really what keep us around and has kept us going for years. But sorry, it is very specific, but I think we might have to be talking to you to be able to help you through that journey.
Okay. All right. Well, we have 2 minutes left, so let's see if we can get through at least 2 questions in that time. In your presentation, you did talk about untethering, and one of the attendees was wondering, how do you do the untethering without doing an entire building?
The untethering without doing an entire building. Well, this is classroom-based. We've done a cart of iPads. You have to have wireless. I guess the requirement for all this to really happen is it's not a bandwidth scenario. It's an access. So as long as a classroom has wireless access, you could roll a cart of iPads in, and the teacher is able to. The students don't have to be on the same wireless network. A lot of schools have teachers on one network and students on another. So they just have to have internet access. The process actually, teachers push what we call a request profile out. It hits Apple on the internet. Apple has a policy that, yep, you're allowed to talk to this particular iPad. That all happens in about 3 seconds on a normal basis. So untethering as far as the Apple TV, one classroom could have an Apple TV. So very easy to do on a small-scale pilot type scenario or across. So the untethering is, roll the cart in, teacher grabs an iPad off that cart and uses it for their teachers. Students use the iPad. All they need is internet access for this to happen.
Okay. All right. Thank you. One last question. Someone did have a question about scheduling a trial of Casper Focus. Is this something that the company offers?
if I was to go to the next slide, you would see that absolutely, they do a trial. And we have an online chat ability. If you go to the website, you're going to see an ability to request a trial or even chat live with somebody that we have standing by to help answer those questions. The other thing that the teams do is they get you on a WebEx and they show you it working live, both sides, let you bring a group of stakeholders together and do a webinar, a WebEx online. So absolutely, please feel free to reach out. You could certainly reach out to me if you wanted questions. I'm really the instructional, pedagogical kind of guy. But if you want to talk about implementation and pricing and things like that, it's really better to talk to somebody else. But I can get you in touch with them.
Okay, terrific. Well, that's all the time that we have left today. If any of you asked a question that we were unable to get you today, someone from the JAMF Software team will follow up with you to get you some answers. And as we wrap up, I really want to thank Dave Saltmarsh for an excellent presentation, and I would also like to thank JAM for its support. One final reminder, we will send out an email to everyone when the recording of the webinar is ready. And that concludes today's webcast. Thank you, and goodbye.